For the Canadian Council of Innovators, Mr. Bergen, you referenced a couple things I'd like to expand a little more. What are you mentioned some challenges with SHRED. Can you elaborate briefly?
Yeah, for sure. So for those not familiar, SHRED's a $4 billion a year expenditure for the government. It's actually our largest expenditure in terms of innovation. About 18,000 companies receive it. But when you sort of dig into it, sort of a handful of companies receive, close to 25% of every SHRED dollar. And it turns out that a good chunk of those are actually foreign multinationals. So in a space like the innovation economy, where unemployment is effectively zero, we're subsidizing the R&D of foreign multinationals while making it more challenging for our own domestic firms to be able to hire and create opportunity for their firms. Now, this has consequences where you're no longer creating IP-rich companies, which is where wealth and prosperity has really moved to, and you're supporting firms that ultimately are taking the wealth out of the country. And to sort of indicate how sort of systemic this is, up until 2021, Huawei was still receiving a considerable amount of money from this program, indicating that we're funding not only the R&D of foreign firms, but also foreign firms that we've actually deemed to be a national security risk, and which we view to be confrontational to us as a nation.
Sorry, I just have to confirm. Are you suggesting that Huawei was still receiving rebates under the SHRED program?
Correct.
Wow. Isn't it also true that about 30% of the program is spent on a cottage industry of consultants that help people with the paperwork to fill out these applications?
Yeah, so I think there's like two pieces here, right? One is, where is the money going? Is it actually leading to outcomes that are leading to wealth and prosperity? Listening around the room, it really sounds like we have a revenue challenge in this country, right? We can't pay for housing. We can't pay for arts and culture, right? And so by creating opportunities where we're able to drive and support domestic firms, in programs like SHRED and making sure that those dollars are being allocated to the right outcomes, that's kind of one step. So definitely looking at it from that framework. The other is also the cost, right? SHRED hasn't really been updated, in more than 40 years. And so we have a program that basically companies have to contort themselves in order to be able to access the funding. And so it requires, a sort of a gambit of different types of consultants and agents. And so an entire SHRED cottage industry, has built up in many practices. Now, look, programs do need overhead and do need to cost things, but when it's close to 25 to 30% going towards consultancies rather than driving outcomes, we've got a real challenge here, a real issue.
Okay. And if I can just add on that quickly, this is not something new. Here at CCI, we've been calling for reform to this program for almost a decade. We secured a win in Budget 2023 to, have some kind of consultation. That consultation process has now happened twice. In both cases, we've participated. But, speaking on behalf of our members in the industry, I would say if we don't see concrete reforms to update the program for the 21st century in the fall economic statement, I think many of us would consider that a failure. So we do hope for the best.
Thank you very much. I think I have about a minute left. On capital gains tax, just so I'm clear, the feedback from your members is it will create incentives for them to look south of the border. Is that your testimony?
Yes, yeah, unequivocally.
And I was also at Indu committee this morning. In my free time, I like to travel around and watch other committees. I heard the same quote. How does it make you feel when you hear a minister say what he did? And then also when you look at like the SHRED you just mentioned, or the amount of money that we subsidize to foreign multinationals in electric vehicle battery sector, but then they're putting taxes higher on Canadian companies that are based here trying to grow them?
Yeah, so I'll remove feelings on this one, and I think we just need to sort of look at sort of the reality. And to quote William Blake, execution is the chariot of genius. And what we've seen from this government over the last 10 years is an inability to execute. Looking at various programs, whether it be things like superclusters, which were downgraded to clusters, whether it looks to the creation of the Canadian Innovation Corporation, the economic tables, I mean, this is really a government that has truly struggled to understand where the 21st century economy is going. And I think sort of the last remarks of a minister to blame innovators for their inability to deliver is an indication that the government has lost the plot, and truly indicates real challenges going forward in terms of how are we actually going to get ourselves out of these challenges economically so that we can pay for housing, so that we can pay for transit, so we can pay for healthcare, so we can pay for arts and culture. And so, I would turn it back really on the minister to say, show us what you've accomplished, show us what you've done, and then we can talk about who's got ambition and who's able to actually deliver.
Thank you very much.